Welcome to Beth's Happy Home. Today we're going to talk a little bit about water storage for emergencies. And the first thing that you have to consider is how many people are in your household. We assume that you would be needing to prepare for about a 2-week period. That's probably the maximum that you can realistically store water for. And so the minimum amount of water that they recommend that you store is 1 gallon per person for 2 weeks. So that would be 60 gallons if your household has 4 people in it. Now, most of us have experienced times when, for some reason, a bunch of dirt gets into the water system, or there's some sort of a spill and the water is contaminated, and it can go on for maybe a few hours or maybe even a few days, and you need water stored for that, and it doesn't even need to be a major disaster. So the thing to consider too is what kind of a container is going to be best for you and your family and for the space that you have. The simplest way to store a large quantity of water is using one of these big barrels. You can buy these barrels at Walmart or Costco, Sam's Club. You can buy them online. They cost between $45 and $60 usually if you buy them from those sources, and they're often blue. I happened to get these that they had juice stored in them, and so I rinsed them out and washed them out with some bleach, and then I will fill it with water. So when you go to use this type of a barrel, you want to be absolutely sure that you put it where you're planning on storing it before you fill it up, because when it's full, it's going to weigh 440 pounds. It holds 55 gallons. And not only are you going to want to find its permanent location before you start filling it up, you're also going to need a bung wrench like this. This one has the advantage of having a bucket opener and other types of wrenches that are kind of all different places on this. This is cast aluminum, and it's quite convenient. The way that it works is you put these 2 little notches into the bung right here, that is the cork or the plug, and just turn it, and then you can unscrew that. This has an internal threading. The other thing you're going to need if you're using a barrel is a siphon pump like this one. And the way that works is you put the tube into the barrel. This has threading on this surface, and this is threaded on this surface, and so you just screw it down nice and tight, and then you put this end of the hose in the container that you're pumping into, but it has to be lower than where the siphon is right here. So you would put that maybe put the pot on the floor or whatever you're going to use, and then you just start pumping it like this. And when there's water in here, it pulls it up into the tube, and as it starts flowing down through this tube, the gravity of the water tension flowing down through this hose provides a siphon. And then when you're done filling it, you just remove this, and it will break the siphon, and then it will stop pumping. But you don't have to pump it the whole time. That's the advantage of it. So that's the simplest way, but it isn't always practical for people. Everyone doesn't have space to store 55-gallon drums, and if you have a larger family, you'd probably need more than one. So there are other alternatives. If you have a big picnic jug in your camping gear, why not store it all full of fresh water? And that way, if you have one of those momentary shortages, or you just have a few hours where you're needing some fresh water and it's not available in your tap, or it's contaminated for some reason, you can always fill your picnic jug. And if you have a full picnic jug, it's handy and ready to go. So that's just a really handy way to do it. Another way is to store it in plastic soda bottles or plastic juice bottles. Now, all of this type of plastic, it's polyethylene, high-density polyethylene, and it's recyclable. And so somewhere on the bottle, it's going to have a little triangle that has a little arrow embedded in the triangle, and then there's going to be a number on the inside of the triangle. If it's a 1, a 2, or a 4, that means that it's going to be food safe, good for storing food. But sometimes you'll find milk jugs will have a 2 on them, but milk jugs are not suitable for storing water long term because milk jugs are thin plastic and they're designed to break down quickly so that they recycle readily because we reuse them all the time. And I mean, they're recycled. And so the reason you don't want to use them is they do break down and they're going to start leaking. So if you have them stuffed under your bed and you go to, and all of a sudden you're going to find that the carpet's all soaking wet because that plastic jug began to deteriorate. So milk jugs are out, but other drink containers are perfectly fine. Another source of water storage that you may not have thought of is your water heater. In this house we have a 50-gallon water heater, and but if you are in the midst of an emergency and your water supply is contaminated or it's shut off, you want to go and shut off the valve that goes into the water heater. It's just like a little spigot. You just turn it so that it's crossways of the pipe. And then there's probably a valve on the top of the water heater if you want to get it out of the spigot that's at the bottom of the water heater. There on the side of the water heater at the very bottom, there's probably a spigot that you can open and drain it out, but you'll need to open the air valve on the top. But be sure to close the source valve before you start emptying that, because it can draw water out of the city and then contaminate your water heater. Out of the city supply. It can be contaminated if you don't shut it off. And I've heard that it shouldn't be able to with modern systems, but it also could siphon the water out of the water heater back into the system under certain circumstances. And some of you may live near water sources like a lake or a river, or you have some permanent access to a large amount of water. And we do live very near a lake, but it's often contaminated with algae that is poisonous. And so I keep a good supply of bleach on hand, and bleach can be used to purify drinking water. And you use 1 drop, like if you got an eyedropper and you just use 1 drop of water per quart, that should be enough to kill all of the biological pathogens that might be in there. But the one problem with using bleach, or even boiling, or using the iodine pills to decontaminate the water, they'll kill anything biological, any living organism that's in there, but they're not going to kill any kind of a poison that might be in there. So it could be that it's poisoned by, or that your water supply is damaged by things that are not biological poisons, like a chemical spill or something. That isn't going to be affected by your bleach or iodine, or even by boiling. But if that isn't the case, if you're just concerned about biological contamination, like from a stream or a lake, you would probably find that it's the simplest to purify it just by boiling it. By the time you bring it to the boiling point, it's clean. You don't have to boil it for a long time by the time it gets that hot, because the biological contaminants are going to die at a lower temperature. So by the time it's actually boiling, it's going to be everything's going to be taken care of by then. So those are the things to consider. How much space do you have? Where are you going to store it? The cost is very low if you consider that you can reuse plastic bottles, but the convenience is much better if you have a space for a great big gallon drum, or 55-gallon drum like this one, or even they do sell 35-gallon drums, and they sell other types of formations that you can, boxes and square containers, and those are fine too. These are just kind of the ones that the average person is likely to have ready access to. So those are the considerations that you might want to think about, but I urge you to go ahead and get yourself some water stored. You're going to die of thirst before you're going to die of hunger. It's important that you have a good supply of clean water, and you'll rest much more easily. And it's good to be prepared, because there are lots of things that are happening in our world these days that we can't anticipate, and I want you to be healthy and happy. Thanks for watching.